Welcome to the Fractured Families podcast. I'm Charity, your dedicated parental alienation coach, here to guide and support families as they navigate the challenges of high conflict divorces and custody battles. On this podcast, we'll share insights, practical strategies, and hope for those on the journey toward healing and justice. Whether you're personally experiencing these challenges or just want to learn more about the complexities of parental alienation and custody disputes, you're in the right place. You are not alone. This is the Fractured Families podcast, where every voice matters and every story is heard. And if you find my conversation helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us reach more families who need it. Hey, thanks for joining the Fractured Families podcast. I have a special guest and friend with me today, Dr. Lynn Steinberg. She is an expert witness in parental alienation. Dr. Steinberg has been in this space for over 15 years. She is a recognized expert in parental alienation. She specializes in reunification as well. She recently published her book, and she's going to talk to us today about the impact this has on parents, what it looks like to be an expert witness, and answer questions for my listeners. Dr. Steinberg, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for inviting me.
Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Well, in terms of working in the fields of parental alienation, I was seeing families where I would see one of the parents who was getting a divorce, and then I'd ask for the children to come in, and they would be on the precipice of alienating one of the parents. I didn't know that was the word for it, just like all parents don't know. And I would say, well, why? Why are you cutting off your mom? I don't understand. And they would say, no reason. We think she's a great mom. We just are concerned. They would use those big words of like 10, we're concerned that she's so strict. And I think of this one case of this mom. They lived in a gang-infested area in LA. And the mom had them in Catholic school. They had to wear uniforms to school. They didn't get out till mid-afternoon. She was a teacher herself. Where the father lived, across the street, was a park that was known for the gangs to hang out there. And so she brought them in, and there were 5 kids, and they could not come up with a single reason why they were not going to talk to their mom anymore. And I remembered that I had, in my PhD program, read about this theorist, Richard Gardner, who, by the way, was not a pedophile. It's something that these groups have made up to say bad things about him. And I went back and read it, and I thought, wow, this really fits what I am experiencing with these families. And there seem to be more and more coming to therapy, whereas before it seemed like more ordinary problems, because my whole life I've worked with families. That's the therapy I've done, is the family therapy. And so I started to look around for some groups that were also interested in this or teaching about it. And I found iStaff, and they were having the first ever conference on parental alienation, at least in our age. I'm sure that Gardner, and I know that they did because it was taped, Gardner and a number of the other theorists had conferences back in the 80s. But there had been nothing for a long while since he had died, and a number of people kept it going throughout the years, but it had to start again and become a big movement like it is now. And so I went to the conference, and as I listened, I began to think, I'm experiencing this. Just so weird. I think that this is what's going on in my house. And my daughters were teenagers at that time. And I had been pretty unhappy in my marriage, but I didn't want to leave because I felt like I'd lose my daughters. Just intuitively, I felt that way. I couldn't put my finger on it. But then I started to be able to put my finger on it, and I noticed that I was being put down. My ex-husband to my surprise, was telling his friends, my daughters, just mean things about me. Like, I'll give you a silly example, but it's an example. We had a Volvo and they were having callbacks on the Volvos because they were having surges in, I guess, the gas. And anyway, I had one of those Volvos and I put it in reverse and it surged and it went speeding over the road, hit a tree, and that stopped it. But when I put it in drive, it went the same thing, went speeding back into the driveway and it hit the gate. And I was so relieved that just by happenstance, there had been no cars on the road at that moment. It was a busy road. And I could see my daughter and ex-husband walking up the street with coffee in their hands, and I was so scared. And he was laughing and saying, "Oh, that's your mom. That's how she drives." Never have I even had a ticket, for driving badly. And I realized that he was really putting me down in a lot of ways, making me sound stupid, saying I was always angry, the driving incident. And I didn't realize at that time that he was just really competitive with me. And I had a PhD and he didn't, or I graduated and he picked a fight with me, so we didn't go to his graduation. But he made sure everybody came to his graduation, So I didn't realize things like that until I started looking at it. And so I ended up leaving the marriage after my daughters graduated from college because I thought they would understand, they would know about the issue. I didn't ever discuss it with them because I didn't feel like I should involve them. But apparently he was discussing it with them. So I realized I was definitely being alienated from my children. And I was very relieved to get out of the marriage. But the minute I left, my daughters didn't talk to me again. And it's now been, I don't know, 15 years and they haven't talked to me. And believe me, I have tried to get a hold of them. And my one daughter I got hold of recently. And I said, I really want to have a relationship with you. I just think that this has gotten so out of hand and, you don't even see me and it gets worse every year. And she said, the only way I would have a relationship with you if you gave up all the stuff that you're doing, all this stuff, meaning, fighting parental alienation and talking about it. And I said, no, I'm not prepared to do that. You and I are both victims of parental alienation. And I would love to be able to talk to you about it sometime. But in the meantime, I really would like to have a relationship with you. And she said, no, I'm not interested. And so that's how it's been for the last 15 years, to my great pain and grief, that I haven't been able to have a relationship with my daughters. And I always thought that my relationship with them was good. I know it was good. I mean, we laughed, we had good times. They told me everything. I'm a Jewish mom. We talked together several times a day. If anything happened, they'd call me. So all that has gone. And now I think they only have bad memories which have been inserted in their heads. That I have said to them, that didn't happen. It's everything that alienated parents feel. So anyway, I started, as I was realizing what was happening, I started working with families in a whole different way and asking them to bring their kids in and having long sessions with them to try to stop what was going on. And I found Linda Gottlieb and went to her training, and Randy Rand went to his training. So I learned a lot about how to reunite families, alienated parents and children. When I left California, I was seeing a different family every weekend for 4 days and was having great success. And there was a success rate in the 90s. That's how well that kind of therapy worked. And I also do expert witnessing in the court. I do a lot of speaking to, educate people about what is going on in alienated families. I talk to alienated parents to try to help them through the whole process with their children. And so mostly I do consultations now, but I also want to continue to do the 4-day interventions because they work so well. And it's no wonder that these groups are trying to eliminate that whole process by calling it a concentration camp and various other words, because I think that it just works to reunite an alienated parent and children in a way that nothing else will work. It's very rewarding to see alienated parents and children get together again and understand what happened to them. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I wrote a book during COVID for parents, for alienated parents, to give them an idea of what they need to do if they're in court, how to choose a therapist, how to choose a lawyer, to tell them all about alienation, how it happens, the fact that alienating parents have personality disorders. So I try to educate people on what was going on. And I called it You're Not Crazy, because alienated parents always think they're crazy because they can't believe what is happening to them, and that they must be mistaken, to think that their partner is turning their children against them or lying about them, or people are not believing that that is happening to them. Because even when I told my friends, they were pretty confrontive with me and not understanding, and said things like, well, you must have done something. I did not do something. I was a regular mom, very attentive, very loving, had a good time with them most of the time. And I'm sure I yelled at them some of the time and
Course.
made other mistakes, which I had to apologize for, but I was not a bad mom. I know that. And finally, my friends did believe me, and they all read my book, and now they are well educated in parental alienation, and they talk to other people. They've met other people. And I think the big thing is that I always meet people who are alienated themselves, or they have a close family member that's been alienated, or they were alienated grandparents. And I remember once I was looking for a lobbyist in California. And so whenever I interviewed lobbyists, I told them what I was looking for. And I couldn't believe it, but all these lobbyists knew about parental alienation. Yeah. They all knew that they had a family member or they themselves were alienated from their own children. It was pretty shocking.
In my spare time on the weekends, I do a lot of hikes, and they're big groups, like 10, 15, 20 people. And when people ask, like, what do? I talk about my day job, but then I talk about my work in this space. I have never once met somebody ever that says, I never heard of it. What happens is they don't know what the word is, but then when you explain it, there's somebody that always comes forward. Oh my gosh, that happened to my sister. That happened to my father. Oh my gosh, that's happening to my uncle. Yeah. And nobody knows what it's called. And we know there's a lot of controversy about the word, and we'll talk about that. But when you explain the systematic abuse that it inflicts on the family, people then recognize it. Exactly. So it doesn't surprise me when you say the lobbyists, when you talk to them about it, they are impacted one way or another. Yes. Or they know somebody who's impacted.
Politicians as well. Mm-hmm. Politicians I spoke to knew about it as well. But we're so swayed by these adversarial groups, who talked in terms of children being killed and, which had nothing to do with being alienated or having therapy for alienation. It was a completely separate situation where one parent knew that the other parent was dangerous and talked to the court, but the court didn't do anything about it. Didn't have a risk assessment, didn't get the parent's psychological test, didn't try to really look into it. And so these parents were murdered, and also not at the rate that these groups claim them to be. I mean, one group claims that I think they said 580 children in 1 year were murdered. Well, there weren't even that many cases of divorce and alienation in the courts that year. So where they're getting these numbers from is anybody's guess.
It's super questionable for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you as an expert witness. I have a lot of my followers and my guests and my clients that they want more than just coaching. They want support in the courtroom. They want support with their case. And your case is a perfect example. And when we talk with these alienated parents, we encourage them to be patient, to be engaged, to be consistent, and that one day, hopefully as an adult, the child will come back. But we also know that those numbers aren't as vast as we would like them to be. And your story is heartbreaking. And it's a perfect example of, even as adults, they became alienated from you as a loving mother.
Yeah.
So these parents go through a lot. You yourself have been through this. They always ask, what can I do? Where can I get help? Talk to me about you and what you offer, and some words of encouragement and support, and how people can find help.
Well, one of the things I emphasize is that once a parent understands what's going on with them, is to get some support. It could be therapy, it could be talking to you, it could be really understanding what's going on. But usually, alienated parents, when they start to figure out they're being alienated and that the other parent is coming into court and lying about them, they get really angry, which is very understandable because you feel so completely powerless. You don't know what to do. You know, you feel angry, you want the court to understand that. And what happens is that the alienator will come in, being very narcissistic, and be cool and calm and collected and oftentimes very charming. And the judges fall for that. There's a few judges who write about it and talk about it, like Judge Anthony, who do understand that these people are narcissistic and they are going to be very smooth talking, and that the other side needs to be investigated before they make a decision just based on how the two people are presenting in court. So I say to people, make sure you are under control when you go into court. That would be number one, because I think that would be very helpful. And it also makes the narcissist unravel, because they didn't expect that. They thought they were going to go in and say, see, this is how he or she behaves, you know. They're always angry. But if they're cool and calm and collected and they present in all the facts, and most importantly, they're able to expose the other party, they will make great strides right at the beginning of the whole process, which I think everybody knows is a very long one, going into court. And what I do as an expert witness is I get all the documentation from them. And usually I will talk to the lawyer if they have a lawyer, and include them, of course, the alienated parent, and strategize for what's going to happen in court. I don't interview anyone ever, because I go on what people say. So I would read police reports, which often don't even make it into the court because the police are pretty astute, you know. I include CPS reports and pick out the discrepancies. I read court reports, what the other party says, what the other party has done, and I write a very comprehensive report, and then I testify in court. And I have been really successful in showing how manipulative the alienating parent is, what they're doing, and something that, although I think that alienated parents are very abused in the court system, I think that presenting in the court how this whole process affects the children, how it will make them crazy, how it will destroy their future, and how they will pick someone who is the same as an alienated mother, perhaps, or, it's very generational. It goes from one generation to another. Like, for example, I think I married my mother, who was very narcissistic, and she actually alienated my brother and I from my father. So of course, who did I marry? Was someone just like my mother, because I still had wanted to be loved by my mother, and so I chose a narcissist who couldn't love me. And that happens a lot. And that's something that I educate the courts about, how it's generational. And if we don't intervene with the children, they are going to pick someone who's an alienator, and they themselves are going to be alienated as parents. And so because I have all this information and all these facts, I can go into the court and educate the judges about all of that so that they then can make an informed decision. And as an example, there was one dad who hadn't seen his daughter for 15 years, and they had been in and out of court, in and out of court. The mother was such a manipulator. And what I did was take the full 15 years and I wrote about how she got in the way of the dad seeing the daughter, how she manipulated facts. So it seemed like the dad was just this crazy, insane criminal, that she was never going to let see the daughter. And I gave examples of the daughter's behavior too, because she would be trained, if she even saw her dad from a distance, to call the police and say, he's stalking me, he's doing this, he's doing that. And there was even a situation when it wasn't even her dad, because she didn't know what her dad looked like.
Wow.
And by this time, she was, I think, 16 or 17. And what happened was, when the judge heard all of this, he basically said, well, Dr. Steinberg, you can have the case. What do you want to do about it? So that is frequently the result that comes about in court, which is, yes, I can see what's going on here. I can see that this poor child is suffering because they only have one parent and not two, and they have a perfectly good parent in the other parent. He or she has not done anything wrong here. And what can we do to remedy these situations? And what remedies it, of course, is, if the children are a little older, is for them to go to reunification therapy with the alienated parent and live with the alienated parent. By the time the 4 days is over, we've gone through all the ways in which the alienated parent and children are going to reunite and live together, and how they will not be seeing the alienator for about 90 days. And we picked 90 days because it takes 3 months to really change a behavior. And also in court, the judges have put me in charge of the alienators therapy. And so I vet a therapist who's going to see the alienator. If it's not working out and the alienator is still saying the same thing, then I change the therapist and, follow what's going on with the alienator. And so far, we have not been successful at reuniting the alienator and the child, because the alienator refuses to acknowledge that they alienated their child and that that's child abuse. And now some of these parents have lost custody forever of their child.
Wow.
They don't see their child. Some of them have gone to jail for continuing to, do things like get what is that called? The raise the money.
Oh, GoFundMe?
GoFundMe pages. A number of them have done that to pay for some great attorney who's going to protect them from the reality of what's going on. And one of the researchers did a study where she had, I think, alienating parents and, like gave them this kind of psychoeducational course and helped. They gave them therapy and
Yeah.
tried to support them in
Mhm.
reuniting with their children. And only one parent out of all those parents actually saw what she was doing and
Oh.
apologized to her children and was reunited with their children. You'd think that the children would be enough of a reason to
Mhm.
say, yes, I did those things. I'm so sorry. It was not good for you, and want to reunite with their children. But no, they can't admit it. The narcissists never want to admit that they're wrong. And the person I was married to never did. In fact, one day he said to me, I said, but you're the one who always is right, and I pretty much go along with that. And he said, well, two wrongs don't make a right. So if I'm going to admit that I was wrong, that's two wrongs making a right.
Oh my
I never
gosh.
understood that, but it's stuck in my mind forever,
That's discouraging. I mean,
It's
as an alienated parent, people ask me, Charity, do I continue to fight? It's been 7 years. I've spent every penny. I pay all my money goes to child support. And what the money I do have goes to legal fees. And it's been 7 years. And my children literally jump out of my car.
uh-huh.
They escape in my care. Do I continue to fight? And of course, my response is that's a personal decision.
Yeah,
Right? I would never tell somebody to not fight, but I have to beg the question with these type of outcomes, when you get this number of parents who are alienators and one recognizes it, you're fighting a mental disorder. You're not fighting a person anymore.
exactly.
And so
Mhm.
so for a lot of these parents, they say, does it ever end? Or I get people messaging me, please help. Can you make it stop? I can't make it stop. I can coach you 40 hours a week and it won't stop that
Yeah,
behavior.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So it's so
Because
discouraging.
it's so brainwashed, at a
Yeah.
certain point that no amount of contacting by the alienated parent really helps.
Hmm.
I think that fighting it in court, that going in the right way, right at
Yeah.
the beginning, which
Hmm.
is exposing the alienator so you don't spend all that money in court,
Hmm.
is really the way to go. But I also consult with people to strategize how to go
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
and represent themselves pro se, because there are ways to do it.
Hmm.
And I teach them about, because they don't know enough to go in and say, I don't want an RFO, which is basically a call to order. I want an evidentiary hearing. And an evidentiary hearing is a right. And that's when you can bring your witnesses. So you can bring your mom and dad, you can bring your siblings, your
Hmm.
cousins, whomever, including your expert witness. And they have to be heard in court in an evidentiary hearing. An RFO is one where you go in for 10 minutes. Anybody can go into the court, the family court, and sit and watch them.
Hmm.
Nothing gets done, nothing. And if they go to an RFO and say, I want an evidentiary hearing, then they will be heard in the next hearing. And you can see how that really cuts down on the time in court. I also teach people, to do what I do and kind of walk them through the whole process so that they can go into court pro se and represent themselves in a very competent way,
Hmm.
because you don't have to be a brain surgeon to be a lawyer. You can learn the limited number of laws available to you in family court. And then lawyers will also, allow themselves to be hired for a limited scope where they just help write the documents. But writing the documents is also pretty easy. I mean, somebody who's an expert can help with those, help tell them how to file it, tell them how to write it, what to include, because generally alienated parents get into defending themselves. And
Mhm.
you don't want to ever do that. You want to go in saying, this is what's wrong.
Yeah.
And these are the false allegations, because I'm sure given what you've experienced,
Mhm.
they will use what these groups call the silver bullet approach, which is to accuse the other
Mhm.
parents of sexual abuse. And they're always the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control, they put out a figure. They said that 70% of allegations, and they took into account CPS, police, whoever makes those allegations, 70% are false allegations. 70%. And the CPS is wasting their money, investigating, when a lot of these, it's so obvious what's happening that they're not closing their case, unless they're a seasoned CPS worker. And usually they don't even have a license, they've just got a AA or a bachelor's degree, and here they are, appearing in court. And the dependency court always takes CPS's word and follows their recommendations, which to me is just unbelievable, that they would do that. I could tell you so many stories about dependency
Mhm.
court, but it's important to get it right in the beginning, and to get some help in getting it right, because that is the best money spent. In terms of what you can do once your children have been alienated, the biggest antidote is to see your children, because children are smart, they
Yeah.
when they see both parents, they can figure out what each parent is about. So they begin to see that one parent is bad mouthing their parent, or not so subtly, and making them think things about the other parent, which when they go to that parent's house, they see that it's not true at all. Another thing is to not allow their phones. And I know for a teenager, it's like they can't live without it, right? But when I do the 4-day interventions, I say, don't even bring your phones. Don't bring your tablets, because
Mhm.
I will keep them, until things are better between you and your parent. And I think that's a good rule for alienated parents when their children come over for a visit, or they share custody. Never give up your custody. Never give up even 1% of your custody. Never give up half of the legal custody that you probably will get. Always keep your custody no matter what, because it's harder to take it away if you put up a fight. But once you lose custody for whatever reason, then it's really hard to get it back. Then you really have to have lawyers and experts in there fighting for you, because yeah, you would have lost custody, and that always counts. The other way to go to court is if you see something that you think is particularly egregious, then you can go in on an ex parte. But I will tell you the problem with that. If you are claiming abuse by the other parent, if you go in, the only thing the judges are concerned with is if the child is safe in that environment. And otherwise, forget about even filing anything, because it just takes up your money and your time. And, the judge is not even going to worry about that. So choose your ex partes very carefully. I have a client right now. He actually won't listen to me, and he files lots and lots and lots of filings, RFOs. He's only had one evidentiary hearing, and he didn't have an expert. So, um, he's spent all of his money. All he does all the time is write filings for the court, and so they consider him a vexatious litigant.
Yeah.
The judges do not like that. So one, always emphasize what the child is going through with judges, even the most the judges who are most favorable and understand narcissistic behavior, if they cannot make a judgment based on what's in the best interest of the children, they're not interested really in what's happening to you as an alienated parent. Unfortunately, as
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and they're only interested in what's happening with the children. So, as an expert, or if you go in by yourself, always emphasize what the research is. And there's a lot of research um, about what happens to children. What are the consequences
Mhm.
psychologically for children and sometimes physically? And children, 1 year in my practice, 3 children actually committed suicide when they discovered what they had done, to their alienated parent and what had happened to them, and understanding, just feeling hopeless, about what was going on with them. Very, very sad. And of course, alienated parents commit suicide at a very high rate
All
too.
the time.
I
Mhm.
don't know exactly what the statistic is. Do you?
No, but it's just too high. Even one is too high when you're alienated from your child. And here's the thing, here's the hardest part about it. And I work with clients. I've had people message me and say, I won't take my life, just talk with me. Not that I don't want to be there to talk to them, but even talking to somebody doesn't stop the alienation. And these parents just want it to stop. And it's understandable. You
Mhm.
just wanted to stop because as an alienated parent, yeah, you are enduring all this psychological abuse, but imagine the abuse your child is going. Multiply everything you're dealing with by 100 times because they're with that parent 100% of the time. And so the amount of abuse you endured as an adult, imagine being a child living in that household. And that's what I try to say, especially in our case. It's like, as horrific as the outcome was in our case, that child is now under the care of that sociopath
Mhm.
forever.
Yes,
And then if adult could not handle the relationship, you as a grown woman had to walk away from a narcissistic relationship. A child doesn't have that choice.
that's right.
And the abuse is detrimental long term. And so I think it's really important that, to your point about court, is really helping the judges understand that. So, on that, I want to ask you, in our case, they said it was junk science. We get that question all the time. How do we approach it if you don't know what the judge's position is? I tell a lot of my clients, go into the courtroom, sit there for a day, and watch your judge's hearings. And you're going to, in a day or two, hear a family court case that alienation is going to be discussed. Recognize their position and then pivot your
Mhm.
approach around that judge's perspective. So,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that as judges say
Yeah,
it's
no,
junk
I think
science?
it's really good advice. And sometimes when I go into court, the judge will say, not very often, but they'll say, I don't want to hear the words parental
Yeah,
alienation, and I say to them, well, what do you want me to call it? Would you like me to call it coercive control,
yeah,
psychological abuse? And I just run through all the terms that I've ever heard
yeah,
parental alienation being used. And of course, it's shaming the judge, right? So they usually say, oh, okay, just let's get on with it. And I will stick to coercive control because that's a law in California
yeah.
and a law in many other states. And that
Mhm,
law says that if a child is being coercively controlled, which alienated children are being coercively controlled,
mhm,
that the judge has to make an evaluation to transfer the custody of the children to the other
mhm.
parents. That's the law. And that's what I say to the judges. That's the law. You have to follow the law. They
Yeah,
don't like that, but they do have to, or otherwise the parent has a good case to appeal.
yeah,
But I also say to the judges, hold on, people can't say pseudoscience because there is way more science
yeah.
proving parental
Yes.
alienation, and there is barely any, I can count it on one hand, saying
Mhm,
that it's pseudoscience without backing it up. So we need to look at all the science. And Amanda Sillers, I don't know if you know who she is,
mhm,
she's in Australia.
mhm.
And she always puts out the latest version of all the scientific data. And so that's available. I mean, people could probably ask you, or they could send me an
Yeah.
email and I'll give you the reference. You can print it
Yeah.
out and take it to the judge, because we have a plethora of
Mhm.
scientific data. All our conferences, which sometimes bore me to death, are about scientific data, the latest scientific data proving some aspect of parental
Yeah.
alienation. So we have to challenge whenever they say something blanket like that as absolute nonsense. That's what I say to the judges. This is ridiculous that this even is brought up in court, because it's usually the other lawyer bringing it up.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
so I say, it's just a red herring, the same as bringing up there's no such diagnosis of
Right.
parental alienation. First of all, there's a lot of diagnoses in the DSM-5, and everybody acknowledges them. But secondly, it isn't called parental alienation necessarily, but there's child-parent relationship problems. The DSM-5 does not diagnose syndromes. They diagnose individuals. So why these lawyers even bring it up just mystifies me. I mean, it's the most ridiculous defense ever. And that's what I say in court. That is the most ridiculous defense. The DSM, if anybody even looks at it, diagnoses individuals. So they will diagnose the alienator. They will diagnose the alienated parent. They will diagnose the alienated children and usually use the parent-child relationship. But there's 5 diagnoses that fit. And sometimes with teenagers, there's also like conduct disorder that fits, because the alienated children are definitely exhibiting
Mhm.
conduct disorders. And
Yeah.
that diagnosis, if you have to diagnose anyone, is available to you. But it's important in terms of clinicians to diagnose everybody in the family, because, and give it in the report to the judge so that they can see, that this person is normal, this person is psycho, you know, and these kids have conduct disorders. I'm just exaggerating now, but that's the idea. You give it to them and say, these are the diagnoses if you want them.
So one of the things that I hear a lot, and it was in our case, is, well, the alienated parent, you go get a psychological assessment, but the alienator, because you came forward first and you're the one making the allegations, you don't need to be assessed.
Oh,
That is so biased. Like, how do you
that's
get around that?
just ridiculous. I mean, if there's a lawyer involved, because I work closely with the lawyer, I always say, absolutely refuse that. Say, if there's got to be an assessment of one, there's got to be an assessment of the other.
Yeah.
The reason why you would have like a PhD for your expert witness is because we are taught
Mhm.
how to do psych exams and
Yeah.
how to read the results. So what I always do is I say, I want the raw data of these psych exams, because oftentimes, I hate to say this that psychologists even do that, but I'll give you a really good example. A client of mine was diagnosed by these psych exams as schizophrenic. She's the most unschizophrenic person I know. I mean, she's just very practical and giving of herself and caretaking. She is not schizophrenic. She has no thought disorder. And her ex-husband, he's a homicide detective, which will give you an idea of what they're dealing with. He was supposed to take it as well. And the psychologist said that he tested as normal. Well, when I went and looked, first of all, he refused to finish the testing. So how do you diagnose
You
somebody as
can't.
normal? If
Yeah.
they refuse to do a psych test and they've been ordered by the court, that is not normal. And when I went through it all, he definitely got diagnosed as narcissistic from what the raw data said.
Wow.
But the psychologist, for whatever their reasons, was diagnosing him as normal and recommending, which is against ethics, the ethic codes that psychologists and other professionals not make recommendations in this case unless they are custody evaluators. But, if you point this out, you can say, and this evaluator said that this father should get custody of these children. I just don't see how that makes any sense. And then you can really go into it. And then after that, it's in the records. You have to get things in the record. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
get them to rule that there is parental alienation and then rule on all the other discrepancies. Like this dad did not sexually abuse his children. And these are the reasons why we've decided that. And what do you know that's better?
Yeah.
Not much.
I've learned through our cases that objections are critical because that's where you get your grounds for appeal.
Yeah.
And we find
Be in the record. Yeah.
yes. Yep. And so one of the other big challenges a lot of my followers and listeners and clients are struggling with is legal counsel that actually fights for them. And so it's like I almost end up doing it myself because
Mhm.
I pay all this money, they don't object, and they
Oh
actually
my
want them to
God.
settle. Well, why
Here,
don't you just settle or
in
stop
my
fighting?
book, I I give a number of points that you have to look for
Yeah.
in a lawyer.
Okay.
And if you are the consumer, after all, if they're not doing a good job,
Hmm.
fire them. And there are organizations like PASI who have lists of lawyers who are competent in parental alienation. If you really like the lawyer and they're your some in-law or other and you have to keep them, you can get one of the lawyers who are associated with the movement to be an expert lawyer who comes in and they try it and use the license of the lawyer that
Yeah.
you want to be there.
Right.
But that lawyer doesn't say anything. It's
Right.
the expert that tries the whole case. And
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen these incredible expert attorneys come in and try this case. And I don't think they lose, really. I mean, I haven't heard of it and I haven't seen it when they are the ones in there and objecting and proving and using the expert witnesses in a way they should be used, then there's a win on your side.
I wish we had done that in our case.
Oh,
Things would have been different.
yeah, you didn't know, right?
Well, the judge didn't allow it. He didn't allow us to change lawyers and didn't allow us to give our expert witness time. So
Yeah, I heard
so
that. That's against the judge for
it
sure.
is. And I had a guest just the other day, and we talked about the power of the family court judges and
Oh,
how they single handedly dictate the outcome of your child's destiny, right? They, with their choices, their decisions, and their rulings, they determine the path your
mhm.
child moves forward with in life. And it's horrific. Talk a little bit about some of that.
Well, the lawyers and the expert witnesses need to understand that what they bring up so that it can be put in the record. The
Mhm.
expert witnesses need to, because the expert witness is basically your voice.
Right.
You get to say whatever you want to say through the expert witness
Hmm.
because they can say anything and everything. And so make sure that the lawyer and hopefully the expert witness is saying everything that they need to say to show that you are not doing whatever you're being accused of doing, and that you're a perfectly good parent and you should be able to see your child at least half time, at least, because what I always try to establish in the court is that the alienating parent is the abusive parent and the children should not be with that parent. So
And and
having
so
somebody who can be an authority on these issues is really important.
So before we get ready to wrap up, I want to talk about protection orders and how false allegations of abuse and protection orders directly impact the targeted parent's opportunity to continue to have a relationship with that child. The first thing they know is going to happen is you're going to get a protection order. And in rare cases, you still get parenting time, but in most cases you don't.
Mhm.
That's the alienator strategy.
That's why you need to, because what happens with alienated parents is they get in the position of defending everything.
Mhm.
And that's why right in the beginning, before you even get to court, be in the position of being offensive and
Mhm.
not defensive.
Yeah.
And explain to the judge, because you do get to talk. I've been to a number of those hearings with my clients, and they do get to talk to the judge before that order is put in place, that, this is an absolute lie. Oh, I could tell you about alienating parents. I mean, they take like a temporary restraining order and they take it to the schools as if it's already a restraining order and say, look, I have this restraining order and, you
Mhm.
can't allow my ex to come onto campus at all, or you have to get them arrested. And that's just such a miscarriage. I mean, you need somebody who's always on your side, who can stop it immediately, who can go after the alienator and put them on the defensive. And that's always my goal, is to put the alienator, like
Mhm.
when people are ordered into therapy or they come to the 4-day interventions, I don't even talk to the alienator. I say, you're out of it now. You can't
Yeah.
talk to me. Talk to your own therapist or talk to your own lawyer, and they do try to sue me a lot, a lot. The board said they have a special trash can for me.
Oh my gosh. How
'Cause
stressful though.
there's so many. Yeah, I mean, I don't hear about most of them, but every now and again I'll hear about one, and it's always the alienator,
Of course.
saying, I made a recommendation, or, I did this or that, and they demand this or that. And the board usually doesn't agree with them, fortunately. Sometimes they do, but yeah, it's just very contentious.
It is contentious. So, any final thoughts for our listeners as we close out?
Well, I think one of the things you brought up is, what do you do when your children are alienated from you? And I know there's a lot of these places that say, you know, join me and I can um, reunite you with your child in 2 weeks. you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
I don't think that's the case. I would like to see some of these families that got reunited through their methods.
Yeah.
And usually, they're not even trained. Most of them don't even have a degree, you know. They've never taken a parental alienation class, but they're like coming up with all these ways to, reunite with your child. And if you're not successful, it's your fault. You didn't do something right.
Right.
But of course, the one way I think that makes a difference to children is to stay in contact with them in some way or another. Children always stalk their parents on Facebook, so don't block them. Let them
Mhm.
stalk you and put things up that you want them to know about. Um, send them texts or emails, whatever you can send them. Let's see what else has really worked. Can you think of some things that have worked when you've given people advice?
I think when you do if you do have your parenting time, refrain from bad mouthing the other parent, refrain from allowing your emotions and dislike toward the other parent impact the relationship time with your child. And lastly, don't question them. Don't ask them about the other households. All it does is create more guilt and separate the divide that you already have with that child.
Yeah, and never talk about parental alienation.
Yeah.
There's
Mhm.
an amazing video, maybe you've seen it. It's put out by Richard Warshak. It's called Welcome Back, Pluto. Have you seen that?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think he has some really good points, and it's available for alienated children to look at if they want to. I mean, you
Yep.
could post it on your Facebook and say, this is the best video I've seen for alienated children.
Yeah.
Um, do things like that that might
Yeah.
show them something, or put something short on. I mean,
Plant
there's,
the seed.
yeah, plant
Yeah.
the seed. That's a good way
Right.
of putting it.
Dr. Steinberg, thank you so much. And I will make sure we share your email. And again, the book, You're Not Crazy, a great read. It will be on our show notes. I will also put your email, your website, and we look forward to our listeners connecting with you. We look forward to your expertise and actually of having you as a guest again whenever you want. So
Uh-huh.
thank you again.
Whatever you want. If they want to talk about something and specifically, I think that at this point I could probably address it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for
Thank you
joining the
for having
Fracture.
me. I appreciate it.
Thank
We
you.
want to get the word out.
We do.
Yeah, change things for sure.
And we'll make sure everyone reaches out to you. And thank you for joining the Fractured Families podcast.
Thank you, Charity.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Fractured Families podcast. I hope our conversation has provided you with support, understanding, and actionable insights to help you navigate your own family challenges. Remember, healing is a journey, and reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You're not alone in it. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more families in need. You can contact me on social media at Parental Alienation is Real and visit our website for additional resources and ways to get involved. Stay strong, stay connected, and keep fighting for the family bonds that matter most. Until next time, take care and stay resilient.